today to have a chat about your experiences with DCP, working as a carer, and the impact that it had on you. Would you like to begin by talking about your background as to who you are and what you've done in your life?
Okie dokie. I grew up in Echuca. I'm, as you know, I'm one of 7 children, and I've worked almost everywhere. I've been in Defence Forces. My last 3 jobs have been, I worked in the brewery that's recently shut down. The last 20-something years I've been a teacher, and my last job was working with DCP,
So
DCP.
what was it that drew you to want to do DCP?
Interesting question. Well, where I worked with the Education Department, I mainly worked in Category 2 and 3 schools, and they are really hard schools, always out the south because it's a long way to the north from here. And we would experience there as a staff in the school so many problems of neglected kids' behaviours that they would bring into the school, or that would be showing trauma as a result of trauma, and the result of their trauma then traumatising other kids.
So you could basically see, while you were as a teacher, the impact of like lives on these kids, and just desperately wanted to get to them before they got to the stage that you saw them at when they were at the school.
Yeah, well, we'd see all a whole variety. For example, we would have at least 5 kids with DCP in care in the school, every school, not unusual at all. We'd have at least 2 or 3 kids in each class that we would be reporting on, some constantly. We would be reporting on the child abuse line. As teachers, we have our own hotline. And of course, these kids, a lot of the time were the kids that we spent most of our time with, trying to build relationships and deal with their trauma, and how they were dealing with their trauma, which is a lot of the training we get in Education Department. There were kids who should not have been with their family, and you'd be reporting on them constantly, and you just could not see why they weren't with their family. And there were kids who were doing really, really well in DCP, and it was about time that they moved on from where they were. They should not have been in care anymore. So, you know, there was a variety, huge.
So it sort of sounds like you have that empathy within you and that compassion within you and that strong desire just to make an impact on kids' lives.
Yeah,
so that was your main aim before you went into DCP, was to impact these children.
At my age, there's a lot of pressure within the Education Department to move on. Greener pastures.
Yeah.
And so give a younger teacher a job, basically. And so I started looking for a job, and that's what I really wanted to do. One of our SSOs had done it, and I'd been talking to her and finding out about it. And that's something I wanted to do. So that's what I did.
Yeah. And what was your first experience when you went to DCP as a carer? What do you remember about it when you first started?
Well, I said, what time do I start? She said 3 hours ago, because no one will go in. There were 6 kids just brought into care, siblings, all under 11. And they had the social worker out there and some other DCP people, and they couldn't get the children, well, I won't say to behave, but to start settling into the house. So when I got there, finally, it was way over the other side of town. But 3 of them were standing on the garage roof, and they were throwing stones and breaking next door's windows. And immediately, bang, 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 I got them down. The teacher just have that way with kids, and the social worker's going, oh, God, because they were struggling, and next door wasn't real happy either. So working with that 6 kids was probably, it was probably the most demanding and yet rewarding thing I've ever done. One single child would have 2 carers. So an enormous amount of money is put into keeping the young person safe from themselves, from being out on the streets. And let me tell you, they were not often successful. Main concern are the girls. who are coming into DCP at around 11, 12 and finding the actual freedoms they have because they meet other DCP kids and they're told your rights, these are your rights, and immediately they know. And so they'll just go, you have to let me out, you're not allowed to hold me in. And I'll tell my social worker, that's it. So you're 12, you've been homeschooled, you've never been allowed out. And all of a sudden you go out until the early hours and you're with much older boys. So we can't do anything. We can put an NPR in, missing persons report with the police, but if the police don't know where they are, and so when eventually young girls come back in pregnant and they have and this is the main thing, stuck between a rock and a hard place, that when they turn up pregnant, there's absolutely nothing legally that DCP would have been able to do to stop that.
In your time at DCP as a carer, what impacted you the most? Like, what was a case or situation that just really broke your heart?
Well, the sexually abused ones, particularly the younger ones, were very, it hit you emotionally and actually traumatised a lot of us. I know one lady, and I think I've discussed this one with you, she was a trainee social worker. She saw a behaviour that a 4-year-old was doing in her sleep, which was simulating a sexual act for an hour or so. And she said she could not do this job, and she never came back. And it haunted me from the first time I saw it, and a year later I saw it in a different house, the same girl. And, it's something that I would constantly dream of. And I'm not sure if that girl was getting a lot of help to deal with that. Her behaviours at school are terrible. But that sort of thing traumatises you. Leaving children that are in care that you have, and silly on me, come to care for, and know that they're with people who shouldn't be in the job. That traumatises you. You worry about all the things that you've set up to deal with behaviours, to deal with socially unacceptable acts in the house. And then another social worker, care worker will come in and totally not take any notice of that, even if you've been making serious headway with these kids. So you go home and worry all day about that, worry about their safety and particularly how emotionally affected the kids are and how they miss their mum or how they miss their grandparents or even their dog, and how they're not dealing with it, and that, every night they're going to bed, they're having the same emotions of crying themselves to sleep.
So it sort of sounds like you went into this role with such a desire to help the kids and found yourself, in fact, quite helpless in the situation that you're in.
You nailed it. Yeah, you nailed it. But I can't imagine anybody going into the role without that desire. And yet, clearly, it's what people do.
So how long did you last in the care role?
It was only 2 years, but extenuating circumstances.
Felt like a lifetime, probably.
Yeah, it did. It did. Like when I worked in a prison, felt like a lifetime. 2 years, horrible place. But again, when you feel like you're actually doing something that is meaningful, you're loath to not do it anymore. But, wasn't given a choice, and might have burnt a few bridges as I left.
And you've mentioned that, like for the impact on you, having been working in DCP and as a carer and as a really caring person as well, it made you want to drink a little bit more. Was that?
As a teacher, I would drink socially. I now drink every night. Because I still, I wish I was still in the role. I sort of might have burnt a few bridges there because I a few truths were told, because I don't see that the department is run in the most competent manner.
You mentioned that you felt like that sense of nurturing for the child and that sense of really caring for the child and their emotional well-being just wasn't there.
Well, that's a fact. That's a fact. One of the hard and fast rules is to have no emotional attachment. Obviously, that I'm not saying that's a good thing but how do you get around it? Because you've got kids who've been taken away from everything they know, their friends, their family, not their schools. Usually they're kept at their school, but they're normally kept 40, 50 minutes away, a long way away from their schools, so that they can't see their friends. They're not allowed to go over and stay. That would take a year, being in care, and finally the social worker will reach out because they've got to clear the family for these children, make sure they're absolutely 100%, or otherwise the kid can't go and stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that they have no adult other than maybe a brother or sister, there is no emotional, excuse me, no access to comfort and soothing in an emotional way to any of the children. It's a really stark life, and that's not right. That's not right. We spend a full day course, normally that's the education department, but a full day course with DCP on the effect that being taken away from your family and your parents, your mother particularly, what that says for your future. So exponentially it gets worse as you get younger, as the child gets younger, the age. So if they're only 2, that young person's, the effects on that young person will be a lot worse than if the child was 12. So
with the emotional toll as well, is that something, do you still feel like that is like sort of stagnant kind of stuff that's come from that role? Like it's still affecting you?
Yeah, because when you think about, what can you do? What can you do? There are so many things that need fixing, and yet it's called rocking the boat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a boat rocker.
Was it a general kind of consensus across the board that everyone's like trying so hard to make an emotional positive impact?
No.
No.
A lot of them were, I call them overpaid housekeepers.
Okay.
A lot of the words said to the kids could have been scripted, the DCP policy. But if DCP policy doesn't cover a situation, you don't go to the one that's closest. You improvise in a manner that is, good for everyone, as much as you can. There's an equation that you can relate how you are mentally and emotionally and physically to being drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And I was driving well over the limit.
Mm-hmm.
If you can make that mathematical equation.
Yeah.
Yep. I should have been locked up. My counselling support died last year. My husband passed away last year.
Yeah.
Debriefing, it's like teaching.
Yeah.
You get there and you've all been through the same experience, although, with a huge range of behaviours.
So, Andrea, what do you think needs to be changed in DCP?
Needs to be burnt to the ground and built from the foundations up.
Yeah.
It's like, as I said, the education department now, it's more important how it looks. There is one girl I can mention who she would go out and perform sexual favours for people in parks to get a cigarette. So it was and then sometimes they'd drive her to Marion, and there's nothing you could do.
Yeah.
And at least she lived in a place where she couldn't hurt the walls, which is horrifically expensive. But she would attack people. She put one of my co-workers in hospital, a lot of people out on stress and workers' comp because they can't come back.
Yeah. So what would you like to see in the workers that go to DCP? What sort of qualities as
So-
people?
First off, we'll start with the social workers
Yeah.
because they have all the power, and quite often they have no life experience. I have met older social workers, but mainly they're in their 20s. They've read a couple of books at uni and then they've been let out to, take charge of these poor young people. So the social workers, they do a hard course. They do a hard job, and my hat's off to a lot of them. But sometimes what they think is best, they need to have had a little bit more life experience to be able to make judgments like that. Then you get to the carers, calling a good 50% of the people I worked with carers, not a good name fit at all. As I said, overpaid housekeepers and cooks. And maybe that's what they should have done and let somebody else do the caring, because I didn't see any caring at all. I'm talking about emotional type caring, teaching type caring, not making sure that the kids had made their bed in the morning type caring. I mean, that's caring in a futuristic, looking forward type of way. So the getting the job that I had should have been really difficult. People I know, even from education department, that haven't been successful, going through the very strict guidelines in the tests, psych tests, not really physical, but all sorts of things, interviews, to get through it, and then I would say 95% don't make it. They're really strict and they're really picky. But, it's like nursing. If you're smart and you can do the nursing course, a lot of you will still make great nurses, but there are so many girls who, and it used to be that way, who should be nurses and who are not because they're technically, they can't do the uni course.
So do you think it comes down to just having a basic sense of compassion, a basic sense of empathy within the person?
That's very easy to, that's very easy to put on. You can go, you're a caring, oh yes, I'm a caring person, love my dog. So yeah, you can pull the wool over anyone's eyes, and that's that way. But as I say, go to the teachers. You need a lot more teachers in the job because, with the behaviour management, letting kids get out of control and lose the plot, where you've got a person who's had all the training and go through that on a daily basis, basically.
So, Andrea, what sort of life experiences do you feel people need to be therefore able to work at DCP?
It's sort of like an unemployed person when they go for a job and they haven't got the experience, but how are they going to get the experience if they don't have a job? Not perhaps being older, but having lived through different jobs, maybe working, there's a thing, get them to work in a school, see problems firsthand rather than reading about them on a sheet of paper. Working in a school, or maybe getting a job or as a counsellor in a school. Just having, worked in a supermarket, and this is how much you get paid. And you have to pay your rent and feed your kids and take your dog to the vet with that. That sort of thing is just so valuable because you get a sort of, lateral type of thinking where there is just not one way or the highway. And that's basically their policy. I'm sure it's in a subtitle somewhere, that there is one way that they have of doing things and it doesn't fit everything. So and social workers have a lot of power, if they have got the experience in life gained somewhere other than at a university or at their own high school. Working at maybe one of the places in town where that you're giving kids living or people living on the street food and blankets, and going around and checking on them and seeing how some of the other people live. It can, and getting them to ask questions of them. How do we fix this, the homeless problem? And it's just one of those big problems like taking kids away from their parents, that you are caught between a rock and a hard place, but there needs to be some successful way, some way that you can work in where you're not running scared.
All right, so thank you so much, Andrea, for having a chat today on camera. I know that, perhaps some of the content that you spoke about is quite emotive, and I'm hoping that this experience doesn't leave you feeling raw or anything like that. So,
Quite to the contrary, I think it's going to, it's one, remember I said I keep thinking, what else can you do? Or at least I'm doing something.